Hello, everyone. Welcome to Library Lovers with Maya Linnell. I'm Julianne Tobin. I'm the OverDrive Australia account manager. I'll begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. This event is brought to you by OverDrive. I'm sure you're familiar with our app Libby and of course the platform OverDrive, through which you can borrow audiobooks, magazines and ebooks. Feel free to comment or ask questions via the chat, and Maya will respond, as will our guests. I'll now introduce Maya Linnell, who is the best-selling author, fiction writer of 3 wonderful rural romances, and her new book, Paperback Hill, is published at the end of next month, May 31st. Her books are available in paperback and ebook and audiobook via the Libby app. And Maya is, in her own words, a writer, baker, and green thumb. So over to you, Maya.
Oh, there we go. Look, magic happens when you unmute yourself. Thank you very much, Julianne, and welcome tonight, folks, to the second instalment of Library Lovers. I'm your host, Maya Linnell, and I'm absolutely delighted to have you here today. If we haven't met before, as Julianne said, I am a rural fiction author. I work for Allen and Unwin, and when I'm not writing or kid wrangling, I'm out in my big country garden or baking up a storm or reading via paperback or via audiobooks. I've always been a huge bookworm. So it brings me great joy to be able to chat to you tonight and also have some fantastic guests here talking all things books, libraries, gardening and baking. So first up, we'll be having a bit of a chat with best-selling author Fleur McDonald. Now, many of you will know Fleur's books. She's been writing for many years and is very well known and very beloved across Australia. So we'll chat to Fleur first, and then next we'll speak with Chiara Priorelli from Wavesound Audiobooks. She'll be telling us all the ins and outs of what goes on behind the scenes of making those fantastic audiobooks that you listen to as you're driving, as you're cleaning, as you're exercising. And then we'll be finishing off with Vicki Edmonds from the Blue Mountains Library. And Vicki is also involved in the peak body that represents libraries across Australia too, which is a bit of a treat. So do grab yourself. Hopefully you've got a cup of tea, a glass of wine, you're settled back and nice and comfy, and we can get chatting. So Fleur, thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi Maya, thanks for having me. This is all good fun, isn't it? Being able to talk to each other across the countryside.
It is such a treat. Look, I am certainly hoping to get across to WA, but in the meantime, platforms like this are absolutely perfect.
Yeah, they are.
So Fleur has been dubbed as the voice of the outback. After growing up in the small town of Orroroo in South Australia, Fleur became a Jillaroo before spending 20 years farming 8,000 acres east of Esperance in Western Australia. Fleur has lived and worked on farms for much of her life, and she likes to write about strong women overcoming adversity, drawing inspiration from her own experiences in rural Australia. Now, Fleur's new novel, Rising Dust, is another fantastic read. I've read so many of Fleur's books from many, many years and enjoyed all of them. This one in particular had me turning those pages really quickly. I couldn't put it down once I'd stopped. Now, Rising Dust was released with Allen & Unwin this month. It's available through bookstores and libraries in hardcover, in digital format, also through the Libby app in ebook or audiobook. And we are so thrilled to have you today, Fleur. Would you be able to start by giving us a brief rundown of what people can expect when they pick up a copy of Rising Dust?
Well, it's another of the early Dave Burrows series. So there's 5 out in the early Dave Burrows series now, and they're always published in April. So you know the difference between the old and the or the young Dave Burrows and the contemporary novels. They're published in April and November. So Rising Dust takes Dave back to his roots back in the stock squad when he was still working his way up before he became the lead detective, and he's in cahoots with his mentor and partner Bob Holden. Dave's been through a pretty torrid time in the last little while. He's had a terrible marriage breakup, and he's had a couple of horrible people trying to kill him and his family. So we decided that I decided as the author, that I needed to have a fairly fiery book following everything he's been through. So Dave and Bob head up north of Carnarvon to a station stay, which is like a caravan park on a station for people that wouldn't know, and they have been called up there with some stock stealing problems, and there's a few tropical storms that come through. They sort of get marooned on this station with some of the storms that come through because the creeks come down and there's lots of floods, and they're not able to get out. And then the rain uncovers a body, which isn't a spoiler because it's fairly early on, and then things just go from there.
They certainly do heat up, and it seems like poor Dave gets the kitchen sink thrown at him. He's there for one job and it just snowballs, doesn't it? And I love how that really keeps us grouped throughout the story. It's a beautiful synchronicity between the weather colluding against them, as well as these different events which really have them stranded, don't they?
Yeah, they are. And until you've been up north and you can see how deep and wide those rivers are and how tall the embankments are, it's really hard to understand how people can get stranded or can even just get washed away, bogged. But once you're there and you see how slippery the red dirt is, and how wide and incredibly strong those rivers are, you can understand how it happens.
Yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about the background of Dave Burrows, because he's a really well-loved character in your books, Fleur. And I know you have readers who really wish that Dave was a real chap, because, they feel like they could sit down and have a beer around the campfire with him. Why do you think readers love him so much?
Well, just let me say first, Maya, that as a single woman, I created him. I've got dibs on him. If he ever turns into reality, he's mine, okay? There's so many women that get in contact. They say, I've got a little bit of a crush on Dave. I go, yeah, me too. I don't know, maybe that's because he is so flawed, but he, like I said, he's been through some really horrible times, and that makes him who he is in the modern day books. He's turned in from a hothead who pushes the boundaries of every aspect of being a detective, or just probably being a good human being, to being really empathetic, very caring. He's lost a previous marriage, so when he's married to Kim, he has worked out, as I think we all do if we ever are unlucky enough to get divorced and then lucky enough to find somebody else we love. I think we work out what we will settle for and what we won't. And I think, having grown through all those processes with him, he's just turned into this flawed but perfect character at the same time. He still stuffs up, but that's what makes him so good. I think that he's happy to admit when he does stuff up as well.
Yeah, and I think I love the way that you write, real people as well, Fleur. So we've got, they're not perfect. You've got people burping and farting and making crude jokes at inappropriate moments and things like this, that it just strikes me as so real. They really leap off the page and into your head. I think you do a beautiful job of painting them. All the characters very well rounded, I find.
Oh, well, welcome to my world. I've got a teenage boy. Actually, he's not a teenager anymore. He's 21. But, that's what they do. And I think, a lot of the guys that I hang around with that are farmers still, or the guys and girls, we know how to have fun, and we haven't taken the larrikin out of us either. So, you know, there's things that you don't do and things that you can get away with. And I guess like with Dave, I guess a lot of us push the boundaries too, which you can sort of put across into a book. And don't worry, like if I've gone too far, my editor pulls me up and says, oh, I don't think that's the right spot for that.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I think everyone who picks it up can relate. They can probably picture a chap in their life that, you know, has got some of those characteristics as well. Now, I've seen some photos, Fleur, of your beautiful back deck. And I remember reading somewhere that, you know, you're often out there in all sorts of weather. You've got the beautiful birds that are around your lovely established trees. For those who haven't seen, you know, your posts talking about where you write, can you paint a bit of a picture of the spot where you do most of your writing? Because I think it's just lovely to imagine, you know, when I'm reading this book, the fact that you were sitting out there in this beautiful vista as you were writing it.
Well, I have to say that even though it's gorgeous, I still feel very contained in here because it's so I've got 5 acres on the outskirts of Esperance, which is a real difference from living on 8,000 acres like I did previously. So when I bought here, I knew that I needed space. I knew that I needed trees. And my daughter used to joke all the time because I kept saying, no, I can't write these books without having some space around me. I've got to have air. I've got to be able to see the sun and the sky. And she used to make all these jokes about you gotta, but you never still do. And so when she's very insightful, my daughter. And when I bought here, I wasn't convinced that this was the right spot for me until a magpie flew down onto the fence and started talking to me just as I walked into the kitchen. The house is a very weird design, and so I really wasn't sold on it. Anyway, this magpie flew down and totally sold the house to me. So out the back, there's a magpie tree, what we call a magpie tree, which is like this huge, massive big tuart tree that continually drops branches, which is okay, but great for firewood, but not too good if you're underneath it. And then there's a really, you know how a tree should look, Maya, you know, like it's round and it's bushy and it just drapes down beautifully. That's the tree that I sit under when I'm outside, and I can look across, you know, great big expanse of lawn down to the chooks, down to the back shed where my camper trailer's kept, and just all these beautiful big, you know, like you say, well-established gum trees. If I'm sitting on the patio, I have a little veranda that runs along the side of the house so I can see out to the front. So if the gate, we don't need alarms around this place or a doorbell. My gate is always shut because otherwise my dogs will escape. And so I hear the chain of the gate and I can see who's coming. And I really love that spot because, I've got a heater, like an outdoor like a fire, like an actual fire, cast iron fire that I get going, and a gas heater if it's cold. But I do love that spot because I can see right down to the front. You know, if my Kelpie runs past, you know, he'll sort of look up and I'll say something to him and he'll look around and, oh yeah, there you are, boss. That's okay. Yeah, good. So yeah, that's what it looks like.
That sounds beautiful, Fleur. Thank you for giving us that description. And I love the idea of having that heater going as you're writing outside. I can pretty much picture myself setting up a bit of one of those gas heaters for my writing warmth because I like that idea.
Well, I can promise you, Maya, my garden won't be as beautiful as what yours is.
Oh, thank you. But you're a morning writer, aren't you, Fleur? So I also remember, I think, reading or listening to you talk a previous time, one of the things that you often do is shut that world out so that you're not distracted sometimes when you really are under a deadline. That's a really neat idea as well.
Well, I've always been a morning person, and I guess that comes from growing up, or not growing up, but working on a farm for such a long time. You know, in June, every year in June without fail, we would AI cows, and we had to get up right on dawn just to see when the cows were cycling, and you could always, that's when it was really obvious. So I used to write a lot when it was that early in the morning, like 4, 5 o'clock. And what I love about that is when I'm sitting inside, actually at my desk, the veil of darkness outside is it's nearly light, but it's not quite, so you can't quite see what's outside there. So there could be something lurking out there that was a bit scary and a bit mysterious. And I don't know, I just seem to work better in the morning after about 11, 12 o'clock. I still write, but that's probably when I'm better off editing. My creativeness is back early in the morning.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I think after that time where I heard you talking about that, I did experiment a little bit with, doing that writing whilst it was dark where I couldn't get distracted. But, I think I find personally that little habits come and go as I'm writing. I'll go through a period of time where I'll best be doing the words before I get out of bed. I tried the Sally Hepworth nifty 350, where she said she, doesn't let herself get up and have a cup of tea until she's got 350 words down. And then I've also experimented with going for a walk in the dark hours and then coming back and getting the laptop while it's still dark. And yeah, do you find that you go through little changes of your routine, or is it quite relatively set?
Well, first of all, I couldn't do the nifty, what did you call it? 350, nifty 350. Couldn't 350. Possibly do that because I cannot operate without caffeine in the morning. So I would have to get up and make a coffee and then go back to bed. So yeah, look, I do swap around a bit just because, sometimes the weather makes me swap around because it's not nice enough to sit out underneath the tree. Sometimes, I know a couple of years ago, not long after I'd had spinal surgery, I tried to write in bed, but it's just not something that I could do. Everything seemed to hurt. So there's the 4 spots. There's underneath the tree, patio, in the office, and if I'm out and about, I just take my laptop wherever I go, if I'm out on the farm or if we're camping or something, and then I'll write out there. I'm probably happier writing outside than anywhere else.
Yeah, wonderful. Oh, that's great. Well, it's certainly, obviously, whatever it is that you're doing is working, because I'm not sure whether the people who have tuned in today know, but you have 700,000 books sold, which is absolutely amazing. It's breathtaking as a young emerging author to see someone who's done so well, and it's even written across the front here, so we're not giving away too many trade secrets to share that. But wonderful. Does it get easier or harder as you get on with more books?
Oh, that's it. And you gave me these questions beforehand, and I thought about that, and half of me goes, oh yeah, no, it's much easier, and the other half of me goes, no, it's a hell of a lot harder. I think that I don't know that the writing process gets any easier, because the challenge there is to stay fresh and authentic, and really you've really got to change things up, because nobody's going to be wanting to read the previous 3 books with different characters in them. So I'm really aware of that, and I've had a lot of comments about the twist right at the end of Rising Dust that everyone says, I never saw that coming. And that's what I talk about, mixing it up and pushing boundaries of the genre and making sure that you never go stale. But in saying that too, the editing side of things, I think I am better at now. You can't help but learn, and I always want to get better, and I want to know different things, and I am much more comfortable in editing now than what I was. It doesn't frighten me, to edit the first, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 books. This edit just seemed to be so huge, and I used to go through 3 stages, and it would be, first one was, this editor's got no freaking idea what she's talking about. And then I'd sort of think about it a little bit more, and I'd say, oh crap, she actually does, but I don't know how to fix it. And then it's like, okay, we've got to the end point where I've worked out how to fix it. Now I just read my editorial notes and I go, yeah, editor's right. Yep, okay, let's go and fix it. And sometimes fixing it involves, talking to other people, just talking out loud. I don't know if you find this, Maya, but sometimes just talking through plot points, and suddenly you'll be talking and you often get the idea yourself, or someone else will just pop a little word in. And I find if I'm writing in my journal and I'm writing about the plot, sometimes I can answer my own questions. It's like a conversation with myself anyway.
Yeah, that's a wonderful process, Fleur. I like that the answers kind of come to you as you're working through them. That's great. Now, we've got already a question from the audience, and if anyone else has any other questions, pop them in the chat box. And if we don't get to them tonight, we'll certainly make sure we get to them or reply to them via Facebook. But Sandra Prendergast has asked you, do you have a Dave movie in progress, Fleur?
Wouldn't that be fun? Yeah, look, there has been some inquiry, but you know, we haven't gone very far with it. It's interesting, you know. I don't understand any of that world. I just got an email to say yes, there was some interest, and then my agent Gabby said just pop that aside and don't even think about that again until I get in contact with you. So I've got no idea what's going on with it. So I've done exactly what she told me.
Oh, that's very exciting, though. I didn't actually know that there was some interest there. So well done. You heard it here first, guys, on Library Lovers. That's wonderful. Now, I also want to know, Fleur, libraries are very special to authors. They're special to readers. Have you got any particular memories of a librarian or a trip to the library as a youngster that really resonated with you?
So I was really, really lucky. Across the road from where I grew up, the librarian lived, and her name started off being Miss Boyley, and then she married another teacher and she became Mrs. McKay. And for a very long time, she was my walking, talking dictionary and thesaurus when I first started writing. And I went to her, I was so lucky that I went to her wedding and when we came back after that, I can remember her, because we used to have, Maya, did you have library classes when you were growing up? Class where there's less library, and I can remember Mrs. McKay sitting in front of the whole class and just saying, now everyone, my name has changed to Mrs. McKay, it's not Miss Boyley anymore, so you need to it's going to take time to remember, but my name is Mrs. McKay. And I knew, I remembered that really quickly and stayed like that. And I think then it was about 3 weeks later, I was allowed to get my first library card, and my number was 150V. I could go and borrow anything that I wanted. I could go and visit Mrs. McKay in the library, which made me very happy, because she always, I always used to go across the road after school and see her, but I could go and see her in the library as well. So just, you know, sitting in beanbags and exploring books that, you know, I wouldn't always get to see because we didn't go to bookshops or buy books much, you know, when we were kids. We always borrowed from the library. So, and, you know, a library has so much else to offer. It's, you know, it's where the older person that hasn't spoken to anybody else that day goes to get their social fix and make sure that they're okay. The baby time, the story time, rhyme time, just so important to have libraries.
And I think one of my favourite things about libraries is they're one of the places that you can go for free, and they're always climate controlled, so they're nice and warm in winter and they're cool in summer. And yes, you know, whether you've got the little kids that need entertaining and you're desperate for that social interaction with someone other than a 3-year-old, the libraries are there and ready. I think it is wonderful, isn't it? And Mrs. McKay sounds like a very special person.
She was, and so often you go to those libraries when I know it certainly happened to me when I had the kids and they were young, and you'll find an older person there that goes, oh, look at that gorgeous little baby that you've got, and you go, beautiful, you can have it for 5 minutes and just give me a break. And they love that too, because that's their social interaction as well.
Yeah, that is lovely. Now, Fleur, thank you very much for joining us. Rising Dust is out in all good bookstores. You can borrow it on audiobook. You can read it digitally through your library on the Libby app as well. Where can people find you, Fleur, if they want to find out more about your books, your writing, follow your beautiful photographs of Outback Australia?
Yep, so on Instagram, I'm there under Phle Macdonald Author, and I think it's writing, the roaming writer, I think is my travel Instagram page. And then, yeah, just on Facebook under Phle Macdonald, and Twitter. And is there anywhere else? Website, phlemacdonald.com.
Beautiful. And now, before we have a chat to Chiara from Wavesound, I want to know about your secret weapon in the kitchen, because here at Library Lovers, we like to talk about a bit of baking and gardening goodness as well as books and library. So please share with us your secret kitchen weapon.
So this is a camp oven. And because I love camp, like it is about, I'm serious, it is about 5 kilos of cast iron. And because I love camping, I take my camp oven. I cook anything in the camp oven. You can cook chocolate puddings, you can cook stews, you can cook roast, you can cook damper, you can cook anything once you work out how to use the coals. And because I've got 5 acres here, often on a Sunday afternoon, I'll just light a fire when I'm allowed to, and put the camp oven on, and we'll we'll have a glass of wine and a stew from the camp oven. I just think it tastes. There's nothing better than like that beautiful smoky taste that comes from cooking with wood.
Oh, beautiful. Well, if I'm ever down in Esperance, I'll give you advance notice so you can put the camp oven, get it nice and warm, and we can have a lovely time around the campfire.
More than welcome, Maya.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for joining us, Fleur. Now, our next guest on Library Lovers tonight is Chiara Priorelli. Now, Chiara is the acquisitions manager at Wavesound Audiobooks. They are Australia's leading independent audiobook publisher, and it's also home to some of Australia's biggest authors, including Christian White, Chris Hammer, Gary Disher, Craig Silvey, Phle Macdonald, and Maya Linnell. She previously worked at HarperCollins Publishers and the very small independent Allison and Busby in the UK before joining Wavesound and heading up the All-Australian Wavesound audio list. Welcome, Chiara.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
That's great. Look, now your role, Chiara, is to select and buy the rights to the best local titles across fiction and the non-fiction genres. In order to publish them into audio. And you also work really closely with the studios, the authors and the publishers in the creative production, including casting the rights for the narrators for the book. What a fascinating job. Can you tell us a little bit about that role, please?
Yeah, well, I certainly consider myself very lucky. I think when I tell people about my job, they're just like, oh my God, it sounds great. And I have to say it really, really is. My background, as you said, is print publishing, so print books. And I did sort of a wide range of things from, publicity to a bit of commissioning, editorial, website. So, and this was all back in the UK. And when I moved to Australia, I actually took a moment away from work to just decide, okay, do I want to continue working with books? And I took about 8 months off. And then I realized, no, books is definitely, I missed it too much. I was doing a few other things. I'm like, no, books is where I want to be. But I just couldn't work out where, I couldn't see myself back in marketing or back in publicity. And then through, because Wavesound is actually part of a global publishers, and our sister company is in the UK. Through that network, they actually said they were looking for somebody to head up this imprint. And I was called upon, and very lucky I was to land this job, because as you said, it's so varied. It's really, I get to use the experience that I've had now in many, many different ways.
Oh, that's fantastic, Chiara. I've always been fascinated by audiobooks. And as I said earlier, I love just popping in an audiobook whilst I'm out walking the dog or whether I'm cleaning. It certainly makes the act of washing windows, which nobody likes to do. I seem to be the only person around here who sticks my hand up for that rotten job. It's one of those ways that makes those hours go so much quicker and more enjoyably. Can you tell us what your working day would generally look like? Because I can imagine that each day is quite different, and you've got lots of different challenges and balls up in the air to juggle.
That's exactly right. I think you might have been a fly on the wall on one of my days, because I've used that phrase so much. I feel as though I'm keeping all these different plates sort of afloat. So I mean, I'll give an example of today. So my morning consisted in talking to two publishers. One was Allen and Unwin, who obviously publish your wonderful books, as well as Fleur's, as a catch up to what books they're publishing in the next coming months, as well as the small publishers, Big Sky Publishing, who are also bringing out some really interesting books for audio and the sort of more male skewed space. So I had a catch up with them, then sent 2 offers for a couple of books that I'm bidding on, then had a sort of a session of looking at various books we've got coming out, allocating them to specific studios and briefing them on narrators that we were looking for. as well as a few calls with some authors who wanted, to have some input on their narration. So really, and scheduling, a lot of scheduling titles into the system to make sure that they're out at the right time.
Oh, fantastic. It sounds really varied and like a great experience every day is something fresh, a new challenge.
Certainly.
And so how do you go about choosing that audiobook? So you were saying just a minute ago that you were putting some bids in on books that you would like to publish into audio. What's that little process like? Little. I shouldn't say little. I'm sorry.
So we're across, I have relationships with literally all the publishers, big and small. We have partnerships with Allen & Unwin, Ultimo Press, and Affirm Press, which means that we sort of get first dibs, first look at the wonderful books that they're publishing. So in terms of, there's a process where, okay, I have to make sure that I'm across those titles, and then I'm either constantly receiving emails or calls, or even checking in myself with all the other publishers and literary agents directly to see what's coming out. And it's just reading a lot of manuscripts, but more with a commercial eye. I have to say, I don't have the luxury of reading a book, cover to cover, but knowing, sometimes you can read the first 20 pages and this is a book that you want to publish. And it's knowing where, whether it's a good fit for the list, whether it's a good fit for audio, and then putting a pitch in to them as to why we think that we should be the publishers to publish the book as opposed to someone else, making a bid, putting in an advance, and then obviously seeing if we're chosen.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I've been really thrilled to see the books come to life, and I've had the lovely Casey Withers do the narration for
she's wonderful.
She is fantastic, isn't she? Just that really...
Yes, she's a favorite at the moment amongst listeners. She has that beautiful tone, and just, you can just relax. You can very easy on the ear, and she just knows how to bring stories to life, and really in quite a wide genre, but she does a lot of sort of the rural fiction as your books. So yeah.
And so how do you go about that process, Chiara, of matching the narrator to the book? Do you have a huge pool and just like an audio memory of this person sounds like this, they'd be a good fit for this one? Or do you have, a spreadsheet that says rural, here's our favorite 10 rural ones?
I know some companies work that way, where they have sort of spreadsheets. Ours is much more, I guess my approach is, yes, I've been doing this now for 5 years, and there's certain times that you read a book and you go immediately, oh, he'd be great for this. Absolutely. But most of the time, we see the audiobook as an extension of the author's work. And I think, that whereas some companies might sort of acquire the rights and then go and do their own thing, and they're the experts, which is to some degree very true, as we are experts as well. But we like to involve the authors if they want to be involved. So in the first instance, we actually have a form that we ask the authors to fill out, and that's a choice. That's a form which is sort of to enable them to. We ask them a few questions. It's sort of allowing them to give as much input as they would like to give in the narration process. Some authors really don't mind, and they just go, no, we trust what you do, go ahead, do what you will. And others have very, very specific views as to what they want the voice to sound like. And that's a balancing act, because sometimes we can be very much on the same page, and then other times an author has a particular idea, but we know that it just is not the right fit for the market. They might just have a narrator where they just love the sound of their voice, but it's not the right fit for the book. So once we get their feedback, I talk with the studios, and our studio producers are across all the talent agencies in Australia. So they'll have even more of a sense of, who's out there. And also we'll get constantly sort of new actors, wanting to, try out for a book. So they will usually they'll scout for who they want or pursue, talk to talent agencies, and they'll put forward a few, candidates. And ideally we get them to read a sample from the book. And that's almost like a test, it's an audition. And then from that, we hopefully find, a few that we might like, or the one. And then we actually put that to the author and with our recommendation, and ask them whether they're happy to approve them or not.
And it's a really interesting process. I mean, hearing your own words read back by someone else is a really, really freaky experience. In general, it's very strange, but to then hear it in 3 different voices and having, the option of going, oh, which one should I choose? This one emphasizes these words and this one does the voices for the characters, or I don't like how they've done that voice. It's a really cool process as an author to hear someone else reading your own work. It's
I can imagine it must be very, I'm sure you have a very distinct, voice in your head for your characters. And obviously it's never going to be what you imagine in your head. So I imagine it must be quite hard to sort of relinquish that, imaginary voice that you have to someone else. So we do appreciate that authors need to be, I guess, open to, to different voices. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, can you tell me something that you've been reading recently, Chiara? Because I'm sure you would have so many different books coming across your desk. For pleasure, what have you been reading?
Well, something that might, I have to say, is ironic about my job, because I do read so much for the job, which leaves me very little time, in fact, no time to read for pleasure. So it's been probably 5 years now since I've actually read a book for my own pleasure. But having said that, it's a pleasure to the beauty of the job is I get to discover so many talented writers and know just so many voices, which I know, I'll return to, at some point when I have time. But it's all about reading upcoming manuscripts. That truly is,
Yeah, beautiful. And did you have a recommendation that people might like to?
I do. One that I have been worked on quite recently, and I am sort of listening now to the final product. I've got the screenshot here. I can show everyone, is The Uncaged Sky by Kylie Moore Gilbert. Does everyone see that? Yeah.
Yep.
Which is a fantastic, it's an incredible story. The woman, Kylie, who was an academic who went to Tehran to a conference, and then she was actually arrested by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard and forced into a sham trial and imprisoned for what was going to be 10 years in an Iranian prison for completely no reason other than her husband was Russian and they effectively thought that she was a spy. And it's narrated by the author herself. And, she was put in solitary confinement, had to deal with, had to go through, terrible things. And it does make you question, it could be anyone, what would you do in that circumstance? How would you deal with it? And it's quite special.
Yeah, wonderful. I'll look out for that one. Thank you for the recommendation. Now, talking gardening, Chiara, I hear that you have had some trouble with a particular plant in your veggie patch.
I do. I'm going to show you. Well, I was very excited because I now have moved to a house with a garden, and I've always wanted to have a vegetable patch. And tomatoes are my vegetable fruit exactly of choice. I'm half Italian, and there's nothing like as good as an Italian tomato. So my goal is to grow homegrown tomatoes. And it was going quite well until this week. And this is now what my tomato plant looks like. So I think I need to get you over down to the Sutherland Shire for your green fingers before next summer. So hopefully I'll have some wonderful tomatoes to munch into.
Oh, beautiful. Well, I went out into the patch after you mentioned that you'd be talking about tomatoes and had a look what I could find. And I thought this one was perfect. It's like a love heart.
I love it.
It can also be some people who had a bad sense of humor could make a lot of fun of that tomato, but I like to think it's just like a love heart.
It's perfect in its imperfection.
One of the things I was going to mention about gardening is, whilst we're on the topic, I was going to talk about something that perhaps you could try in your lovely garden, dahlias. This is one of my favorite plants, and I've been growing them by seed and also by tuber. And I thought I'd take the chance to show people what the actual seeds and tubers look like. So that one's a seedling that I've grown from seeds, but most people grow them from tubers, which are these amazing masses that look like sweet potatoes. So if you've never seen a dahlia tuber, that's what they look like throughout winter. And then if you pick those seed pods, they've got these beautiful, lovely seeds in the middle. So I'll have to perhaps send you some dahlia seeds, and you can
that would be
grow
fantastic.
some of those as well as tomatoes.
Please
Beautiful.
do.
Now, Chiara, before we finish up, can you give us a quick recap of a lovely library or librarian memory that you've got?
Yes, so this was actually back when I was living in Denmark, in Copenhagen, and there was actually a street library, and they constructed this wooden this basically wooden hut, and it was a local library sort of further down that would come and actually replenish this hut for people. And I, as a child, I think that's probably, I put it down to where I fell in love with books, because it became sort of a little sanctuary that I would go in and sit there and read. And I think from then it's this is what I'm doing now, work that I love.
Oh, that's fantastic. What a great inspiration. I love that. Now, Chiara, where can people find out about Wavesound Australia if they're interested in, getting on top of your beautiful audiobook collection?
Well, certainly we are. So our website, wavesound.com.au, is actually more for librarians to look. So librarians who are listening in, that's where you can find all of our upcoming titles and what's been, gone, and what's coming out now and forthcoming. Otherwise, everyone else can check our social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. But we are looking at having sort of a more of a commercial website coming up.
Oh, fantastic. Now, we've had a few comments as well. Shannon Banks says, RIP tomato plant. She's feeling very sorry for your poor little tomato that turned up. And Janine Kimberley, who's a fantastic librarian from Casey Cardinier Libraries in Victoria, she said it must have been quite the challenge for the author to narrate her own story. Do you have that very often, the authors doing their own narration?
Yeah, well, when it comes to nonfiction and memoirs, personal stories, we certainly love the idea of the author narrating their own book, but we do often get asked, or there's a certain expectation that the author should always read their own books because they would know best and they would do it the best. Narration is such a skill. So certainly when it comes to fiction, we opt for, unless the author is an actor by background or has some experience, we would always opt for a trained narrator. I think for memoirs and personal stories, listeners are more forgiving if the narration isn't up to par, because what they're getting is an intimate experience with the author who's telling their own story. So if you imagine you're plugging in, it's as though if you close your eyes, you could just imagine the author is, across the table from you, telling you their story. And it was quite confronting for her, certainly certain bits of the book and sort of reliving that experience. I think it was actually quite emotional for her at times, but certainly she wanted to be the one to read it, and I think it's better for it, because you're listening to that sort of rawness that she sort of even went through herself.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Chiara. It's a really wonderful insight into audiobooks, and it makes me want to listen to even more, see if I can listen to them on double speed or time and a half perhaps, and really, does that get your goat, people listening to them on that slightly?
It depends. certainly when it comes to fiction. Non-fiction, again, depends, but considering the amount of work that we put into getting the right narrator that has the right inflection and the right pacing, and the fact that somebody's just going for the speed for the content, so I'm just like, no, but we we work so hard to really get this right. But more books that get read is better. The more you read or listen to, I can't fault that.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Chiara, for being our guest. Now,
lovely
to
to
top
be
off
here.
the night, it's lovely. To top off the night, we've got Vicki Edmonds. Now, Vicki is the manager of community, library and customer services at Phle Mountains Library. And she's also in the very unique position of being the president of ALIA, which is the Australian Library and Information Association. So she has got her finger on the pulse of libraries across the country, not just in her region. It's fantastic to have you on the show tonight, Vicki. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Lovely. Now, Vicki, can you give us a brief rundown of which catchment area the Phle Mountains Library encompasses?
Yes, certainly. So the Phle Mountains is 100 kilometres west of Sydney, and we're a ribbon development across the Great Dividing Range. And I've got 6 libraries from Flaxland through to Blackheath. And there's 3 full-time libraries. So that's at Springwood, Katoomba and Flaxland, and 3 part-time libraries at Blackheath, Wentworth Falls and Lawson.
Oh, wonderful. So lots of different readers enjoying lots of different books throughout your community, which is wonderful. And Vicki, you've been involved in libraries since 1988, which is amazing. That's pure dedication right there. Can you tell us about your current role at the library?
Yeah, sure. As you've said, I'm the manager of libraries, community and customer services. So my job encompasses not only looking after all of the Phle Mountains libraries and their day-to-day operations and their strategic vision, but then also incorporating them into the community vision of the council and also with the customer service staff. So if you do come in and pay your rates, you do that through the customer service staff, and you'll talk to one of the customer service staff on the phone if you ring council. So to me, they're all very transferable skills, and I've got very similar staff working in those 3 diverse areas.
Oh, wonderful. That would keep you on your toes for sure.
Yes, very much so.
Beautiful. And in your spare time, you're also the president of the peak body for libraries. Now, that must be really special being at the helm of ALIA. Can you tell us a little bit more about that role as well for people that have not heard of the Australian Library and Information Association? What type of things do you guys work on behind the scenes?
So again, that is advocacy and strategy work across the nation. So what I have really enjoyed is I'm actually the first ALIA president with a 2-year term. So the terms of reference changed in 2020. And I thought that it would be wonderful. I'd already been on the board for a 2-year term, and I thought there's too many projects that I still want to be involved with. So I stood as president. So I'm the first 2-year president, and my theme for my 2-year term is diversity, because that's something that means a lot to me. So I've arranged for the recent Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras. We had an ALIA float go into that. So there was a number of people that were ALIA members wearing books, and they got to participate in the march. We've got a diverse National Simultaneous Storytime book in May coming up. There's an annual conference that also has a diversity theme in May. And then we just do work across the nation to make sure that staff that are members are well represented at all levels of government. We're looking at a professional pathways program. So that's where we're looking at different pathways into the industry, so that you may have ended up working in a library without qualifications. How can we give you qualifications so that you benefit by working in the library? So there's just a lot of really interesting projects on the boil. Plus, we're also working with the International Federation of Library Associations on the Sustainable Development Goals and how they relate to libraries.
Oh, wonderful. And I think it is really important, because librarians by nature seem to be very unsung heroes, and they're quite unassuming, and so it's really nice to see that there's that backup in the background, making sure they're championing librarians to keep doing all the good work that they do.
That's right, and just advocating with all levels of government. So just reminding the federal government and the state governments and the territory governments how important libraries are to the social infrastructure.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And just touching back on that whole audiobook, the amount of beautiful audiobooks that are available. I know that you guys with Blue Mountains Library have got 245 Wavesound audiobooks in your catalogue. Is that something that you're seeing growing in popularity as time progresses?
It is, and look, we do look at the statistics regularly, and what we have been surprised by is that our community have not been embracing ebooks, so the books that you would read on your phone or your devices. They're actually embracing e-audio books, and we think that's because we've got a commuter population, so they're getting on the trains or into their car and they're listening to the books instead. And I've got to say, the standard of production of these books is just amazing, and they've become my preferred way of listening to books. And I will also make sure that I listen out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, and I think, personally, I'm finding it is easier to listen to an audiobook that's not normally in a genre that you would pick up and read in paperback. I do also find, I think it's because you've got that personalized, somebody's reading it to you, and you're a bit more likely to stick with it. Do you find that?
Yes, and look, when I was reading We Need to Talk About Kevin, the Lionel Shriver book, I was finding reasons to get back into the car and listen, because it felt as if my friend was confiding this terrible secret in me. And I would just drive to the service station at night. I think I need milk. And I'd drive out, just drive around the neighborhood, because I had to find out what was going to happen next.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. I love that compulsive reading. And sometimes I'll find when I'm so engrossed in a book, and I'll get it on audiobook and I'll have it on paperback. And when I'm driving, I can catch up a little bit. And then when I've finally got 5 minutes to sit down, I'll read it then as well, which is a lovely position to be in, isn't it?
Yes.
So Vicki, what else are you reading at the moment? What's floating your boat book-wise?
Well, the book that I brought, I don't know if you can see that. I have got a thing for dystopian future fiction. So what I just showed you was the Charlotte Wood book, The Natural Way of Things. And I did actually listen to that one on audio initially, and then I read the book as well, because I just felt that I missed more listening to it, and then I had to stop and read it and absorb it. But I do, in between all of my favourite reads, I will pick up a dystopian future book as well. And so if anybody can recommend any dystopian books to me, please just send them through to me, because it's something that I like to read probably once every 3 months, just to remind me about the lovely life that we are actually leading, even though it's been a very unusual 2 years that we've had.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard good things about Sarah Foster's book, The Hush.
Oh.
Is that considered dystopian?
I don't know. I'll have to read that one and see.
I believe it is. It's got a picture of babushka dolls on the front. So she's a Western Australian author. You might have to look up that one. I've heard great. Kath says Station 11 is an amazing story. So
Great.
Keep an eye out for that one. There we go, coming through.
I'm writing that down. Okay. Thank you so much.
That's great. And whilst you're writing that down, I was going to talk about a book that I'm just about to start. It's Victoria Herman's newest one called The Nurses' War, and that is set in World War I. It's about Australian nurses over in England having to set up a hospital for the injured soldiers that are Aussie. So this is one that I'm really looking forward to, and Victoria Perman's a fantastic South Australian author who's been across to Southwest Victoria where we live to do talks, and she's coming our way soon too. So that's what I'm really excited about at the moment. Now, another thing that Shannon mentioned, she said that she likes to listen to them on the 1.5 or the 1.75 speed so that she can get the, not necessarily content, but the ability to focus with her ADHD, which I think is wonderful, the way that these different formats of books and the way that libraries really cater to people, no matter what age they are, what gender they are, what type of diversity they are. It's wonderful, accessible for all people, isn't it?
Yes, very much so. And look, you really do see that libraries are a lifeline to so many in the communities. So just from sitting in there on a day-to-day basis for the company through to borrowing, you know, audio books or large print books or children's books. So yeah, they really are a very essential part of the community.
And also the Braille books as well. Can you get those through the Blue Mountain Library?
No, you would have to join a special Braille library for that. So Vision Australia actually concentrates on that one.
Oh, fantastic. Now, can you tell us something as well about what's happening in your personal garden or your kitchen at the moment, Vicki?
Oh, okay. Well, I am a stress baker. So I will come home of an evening and, you know, I'll do all the normal things. I'll cook dinner, I'll watch a movie, I might do some work. But then if I find that I think that I'm going to go to bed and just lie there awake, I'll start cooking at 10 or 10:30 at night. So I brought my favorite cookie cutter shapes with me today to share. So I normally bake biscuits in shapes. So I grew up on bunny biscuits. This is ones that my mum used to make for me as a child, and I now make for my childhood friends that I'm still in contact with. But this one just recently turned up because I own a Belgian Shepherd, and so this is a Belgian Shepherd dog shape that I'm looking forward to making and sharing with people.
That is very special. I love that, Vicki. I can picture you sitting there after a very hard day at the library when the government's not listening to the new funding that you need for, librarians to keep going on and doing fantastic things and rolling out that dough. I think there's a lot to be said about the therapy of baking.
Absolutely. It is so therapeutic and you have to be in the moment.
Yes, absolutely. Now, can you tell us why libraries are special to you, Vicki, just before we finish up?
Yeah, sure. I was actually going to tell you about my favourite job. I spent 1993 was a gap year, but I got the most amazing job at the Natural History Museum in London. And once a week, as part of my role there, we had to do reception. And so the buzzer would ring, people would have appointments, but you never knew who was going to come through that door. One Friday, I was met by a very wizened explorer, and think, Lara Croft, in the safari suit, this old gentleman that was buzzing frantically. I have to come in and check the library. I think I've discovered a new insect. I've just got off the plane from Africa and I've got photos and I just want to cross-check it because I think it's a discovery. So that was just such an amazing experience to work in a library that had primary sources. So they had diaries of explorers, they had original specimens, and it was just a very special job.
That is fantastic. I can just imagine you would feel such a part of that discovery if it was indeed a new discovery.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Look, thank you very much for joining us, Vicki. It's been really great to chat libraries, and I look forward to seeing more information coming out through Dahlia about all the wonderful work that you guys are doing on behalf of everyone that enjoys libraries across Australia. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
No worries. And now we've got a question from Gloria about dahlias, which I'm always happy to chat to dahlias. Now, Gloria asks whether if a dahlia grows from seed, does it form a tuber? Yes. So every dahlia, or if it survives, that is, if I don't accidentally kill it through too much love or a little bit of neglect. Every little dahlia that comes from, that grows from the seed will eventually form into one or a few of these tubers. So usually this one here is one that I would have planted a couple of years ago and not bothered to dig up and left it to grow in its spot. That's why it's got so many tubers. But yes, they definitely form their own tubers that first year, whether it's one or two or a couple of tubers. So definitely get growing dahlias. They're so rewarding. And as you can see, absolutely beautiful. This is a seedling and they throw up completely different colors and patterns. Now we've run out of time this month on Library Lovers. I'm so pleased to have had your company. Thank you to everyone who asked a question, who joined in. For our very special guests, they were absolutely fascinating. I'm sure you'll all agree that they were full of great information. Now, just a reminder that Fleur's books and Wavesound audiobooks are all available on the Libby catalogue. So if you don't have a book that you're after, you can ask your library to order it in, because that's another wonderful thing that libraries do for us. Now, if you love novels that make your heart race and finding out the process behind writing books and really in-depth interviews with authors, now you won't want to miss Ben's book club. It's next Tuesday night on Zoom, which is also brought to you by Libby OverDrive on behalf of your local library. Now, Ben this month is going to be talking to Jane Caro about her thriller, The Mother. And I've read that one. It really does get the heart racing. So we'd also love you to join us next month for the May episode of Library Lovers with me, Maya Linnell, and the Libby app. I'll be interviewing the cookbook author and one of Tasmania's favourite treasures, Sally Wise. You may have one of her cookbooks in the cupboard. And we'll also be speaking to the editor-in-chief of Money magazine on Wednesday, May 18th, just ahead of getting your stuff ready for tax time. And we'll have a special guest, Amy, from the Riverina Regional Libraries as well. There's so much more in the pipeline, including British bestseller author Adele Parks. We'll have more from Gardening Australia magazine, all coming to you free in the comfort of your own home. Thanks very much to Libby OverDrive. So thank you everyone for tuning in. It was lovely to have your company, really interesting discussions. There's some great feedback there. Anything that we haven't answered in tonight's show, we'll be able to put on the Facebook page. Thank you so much for tuning in. Lovely to have your company. Stay well, keep reading, keep baking, and keep gardening. Good night.